Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So a little while back, I did an episode on the biggest creatures in Magic, and for the purposes of that episode, when I meant biggest, basically what I meant was which creatures in Magic have the most power. So if I'm remembering correctly, I basically went from creatures that had 11 power all the way up to the very tip top, and yeah, that was the purpose of that episode, but I had a bit of a different idea for this one, with kind of a thought experiment, and I blame Alec for this one actually. I know usually we blame Eddie, but Alec actually played a card in a recent game, and I was like, how big exactly do you think that is in the Magic universe? So on this episode, I'm going to be answering the question, in my opinion, in the Magic universe, what is the largest creature, slash being, slash whatever? And again, when I say largest in this context, I mean size-wise, not by their power, or toughness, or whatnot. If every creature in the Magic Multiverse were standing next to each other, which ones would stand out, and what would the largest of all those be? And of course, a quick disclaimer, this is all just my opinion, and I used a lot of what my friends like to call Mitch math for all this, which is a very, let's just say, questionable way about going about things. So I'll explain my thoughts, and of course you can make your own decisions on these as well. So with all that said, let's jump into it. First off, let's go to Ixalan and start off with some Dinosaurs with Ghalta Primal Hunger and Coma Primal Calamity. Now, I should have mentioned this earlier, but it's actually pretty good to kind of have an example with this, but for these comparisons, I'm pretty much going to be trying to ignore power and toughness when it comes to actually determining the size of these creatures. That being said, I will be somewhat taking into account, in some circumstances, the actual flavor text of the card. Again, all this is very Mitch math, so take it for what it is. Regardless, Ghalta is absolutely massive, obviously, a gigantic dinosaur that just, it's huge, right? There's like this kind of giant, mountainous area in the background that it is nearly as tall as that mountain in the background. And there are some structures kind of near it where it is most definitely much larger than that. And the flavor text reads, "The Earth walks strongest of all." So Ghalta is strongest. It says the Earth walks. But when it comes to the comparison to Coma, how big is it? Obviously, Ghalta only has one head, Coma has 3 heads, and as you can see, Coma is clearly taller than a lot of buildings in the area. In fact, Coma's mouth on the one head looks a lot larger than even one of those buildings, so if I had to guess between the two, which is actually larger, I would probably lean towards Coma. So when it comes to dinosaurs, Coma is, in my opinion, the biggest. And obviously, again, both of these are incredibly massive, but they are nowhere near the biggest creatures in the Magic Multiverse. Because now we're going to move on to one that I believe is even bigger than each of those with Apex Devastator. Now, when it comes to size, I am trying to take into, kind of just mass overall, as well as length and, width. There's a lot of different factors with this Mitch math, okay? Regardless, Apex Devastator clearly is standing above, a forest area. And its giant claw is on top of this giant rock outcrop. And its heads are just absolutely massive, and it just takes up a very, very wide area. You also just can't see how far back it goes, really, because, the heads are essentially blocking that, so this thing could actually be pretty long as well. Does this thing just have 2 legs, or are there 4 legs? Is there a tail? You don't really know. Regardless, I'd say that Apex Devastator is somewhat comparable to Coma. I think it is larger in my eyes, and maybe that's just because it has more heads, so it could be, essentially wider. and taller at the same time. I don't know. But yeah, Apex Devastator for now. I am placing this Chimera Hydra right above those dinosaurs, and yeah, a pretty massive beast in itself. But moving on, let's move on to one of my favorite cards from my childhood with Crozin Cloudscraper. This thing is absolutely massive. I mean, it is basically just tearing up a giant chunk of land with one of its smaller arms. It essentially is just ripping up, a huge chunk of forest, holding onto it and just carrying it with it for whatever reason. And yeah, it's kind of like crouching over even, it seems. It's kind of like in like a squat position. And yeah, there's a reason why its name is Cloudscraper. With this one especially, this is a little more zoomed out than the Chimera Hydra that we just looked at, so maybe that's why this is influencing me a little more in saying that this one is larger because it's able to, pick up parts of the actual land and kind of just, throw them around. But yeah, this thing is absolutely massive. So you've heard it here, folks. A beast mutant from my childhood is larger than the new Chimera Hydra, or newish. But bigger than each of these are worms. Now, this one is kind of a little more technical, and when you say, okay, when it comes to size, what actually is large? Is it, the height? Is it the length? Is it the width? I think you got to take all those factors into account again, and this is all very Mitch math, but worms, well, these worms are absolutely massive in, size just height-wise, but they're also incredibly long. So, as you can see in the arts of Impervious Great Worm, Autochthon Worm, and World Spine Worm, you get the size in comparison to buildings around them, and they are, at least the size of the buildings, or very much taller than the buildings, and again, this is just the height, and when I personally think about a worm and its actual size, the height is just kind of the smaller factor of it. The length is going to be kind of the main makeup of the worm, so seeing that this thing is already as tall as or bigger than buildings, and then kind of just knowing that this thing's going to be incredibly long, that is a huge factor of it in saying that these things, the size is just massive. Again, I am taking flavor text into account in some ways, and as you can see on Autochthon Worm, the trainer awoke to begin the journey from the worm's tail to its head. The sun was setting when she arrived. So yeah, this thing is miles and miles long, and again, it is still very, very tall too. And actually with World Spine Worm, that one actually might be even bigger. I mean, with the name, it kind of implies that, but it also basically, and this is just the way that I envision it, it's basically kind of like 3 different worms, kind of inside each other, and that last mouth is just huge. So yeah, worms to me are bigger than beast mutants, and also bigger than Chimera Hydras, and of course, dinosaurs too. But what might be bigger than worms when it comes to kind of overall mass and kind of taking, again, all factors into account with, height, width, length, all this kind of stuff, are the Eldrazi Titans with Ulamog and Kozilek. Now, which of these is actually bigger than the other one? I am not sure. I mean, I'd probably give it to Kozilek just because it seems to be a bit broader than Ulamog. But again, it's kind of probably a toss-up between the two. They're probably about similar size. And we can actually kind of see just the massive scale of these beings in the combined artwork of, Bonds of Mortality and Fall of the Titans. These things are huge. Again, I'd overall probably give, sizing to Kozilek just over Ulamog, but again, it's probably close. Regardless, I do believe that the Eldrazi to end all Eldrazi with Emrakul has got to be bigger than each of them. I mean, you can even just see that with Emrakul's tentacles on the picture on the right in Promised End, they are more massive or around the same size as a lot of buildings. And that's just the tentacles. I mean, the entire kind of body or mass of Emrakul is much larger than that. So yeah, Emrakul as well as the other Eldrazi are absolutely massive on a scale in comparison to a lot of other things in Magic. One that I think personally might be even bigger than the Eldrazi though is the Dragon. Dragons are definitely not small creatures, and in fact in much of their artwork you can see that, if they're in a cityscape, a lot of them are bigger than a good amount of buildings. However, these, what I assume to be normal-sized dragons in the artwork of the Dragon, in comparison to the Dragon, they are super tiny. Where Emrakul is the Eldrazi to end all Eldrazi, the Dragon is most definitely the dragon to end all dragons. Or actually, I mean, I think in the story, it began all dragons, but you know what I mean. This thing is incredibly large. I mean, obviously height, and also width if you count the wingspan too. So yeah, the Dragon, especially since you can actually see, again, what I assume to be the normal sized dragons in the picture, this thing has to be on a massive scale. And speaking of massive scale, and actually, I went back and forth on the sizing of these, and this is kind of where the Mitch math really comes in. Let's talk about some Leviathans and Krakens with Inkwell, Aether Squall Ancient, and Eryximethys. Sea monsters like these are incredibly large, and luckily we have some kind of scaling in their pictures to just see how massive they are. I mean, Inkwell Leviathan, we just see what appears to be just part of it, the front part of it, not even the entire top of it, and we don't see how long it is either. And in comparison, you see this lighthouse that looks like this teeny tiny thing at the bottom. And if you read its oracle text, it says, "Into its maw went the seventh sea, never to be seen again while the world remains." And that is an Esper fable, but yeah, this thing could probably swallow a sea. So again, in comparing it to the lighthouse, and because we can't see its true height and we have no idea how long it is, this thing, in my opinion, is bigger than both the Eldrazi and bigger than the Ur-Dragon, but again, this is where the Mitch math really kind of, comes into play. And then with Aether Squall Ancient, in a similar way, we can see that this thing is, well, in the clouds, just absolutely massive, and, it's above all these mountains, and you can also kind of see these, what I assume to be, are those like Kaladesh flying vehicles, and this thing is much more massive than them. I mean, you can at least see part of its form in the far, far distance, and a big chunk of it is actually underneath the clouds as well. This thing is huge. And speaking of huge, of course, there's Eryximethys Slumbering Isle, an actual island that people live on. Now, the thing that really gets me about Eryximethys is that you can only see, really part of Eryximethys. Most of it is hidden underwater, so that island part is just a very, very small part of Eryximethys, kind of the tip of the iceberg in a way. And you also see kind of other parts of land go off into the distance, and I personally think that that's probably also part of Eryximethys that is above water. So yeah, Eryximethys is absolutely massive, being kind of like a landmass in itself. Moving on though, let's talk about yet another sea monster in a way with Coma Cosmos Serpent. Now, Coma's head still looks like it's probably pretty massive, but what actually kind of gets me with Coma's size is definitely going to be its length. I mean, its body wraps here and there and everywhere around this image, and I can just imagine that Coma is incredibly long. And apparently, according to MGG Wiki, its size is truly unknown because it can apparently divide itself. So yeah, this thing is absolutely massive on a completely different scale from the other sea monsters, in my opinion. Moving on, now let's talk about Meritlage, and yes, I am counting this token. Is it a technicality? Maybe, but is it a really cool creature in Magic? Absolutely. For scaling purposes, we've got this tiny human in what appears to be a glacial area of some sort, and in the far distance, we can see this just massive whatever. I mean, its whole massive body takes up a lot of the horizon, and yeah, it's got all those tentacles, and we don't even see the top or back of it, so we have no idea how long this thing is or how tall it is. This thing is huge. And also we can see just some really creepy eyes and some giant mouth, and I would not want to mess with Meritlage. So yeah, Meritlage, you are massive. Though not quite as large as Okagachi from Kamigawa. And a big thank you to Alec for pointing this out and sending it over, but I'm just going to read a little bit verbatim from the MTG Wiki. Here we go. Its first appearance resulted in the demise of 3,000 warriors who had been sent by Lord Kanda to rescue Princess Michiko from the hands of the thief Umezawa. When Okagachi struck, its jaws ripped upward from the very earth and downward from the sky, devouring Kanda's men as well as a sizable portion of land in one bite. So in one bite, with just one of its heads, I assume the biggest one in the middle, Okagachi ate 3,000 soldiers in a giant chunk of land. And you can pretty much see that, I believe, on the right with Final Judgment, which again is just part of Okagachi, which we see on the left, which has, a lot more snake heads, which are also massive, and, its giant tail goes way into the distance. So this one actually has some good context just to how big it is, and yeah, Okagachi, you are truly massive. Though, in my opinion, not as big as Progenitus. With the Progenitus art, we kind of get something like Meritlage, where it's just this giant being off into the distance, which you can kind of make out and barely see. So clearly, the heads of this Hydra can reach well into the clouds very easily. I mean, again, this is way off into the distance, and this thing is much more massive than obviously any part of this landscape that's anywhere near us. And, I assume those are mountains in the background as well, or at the very least, some very large hills. This thing is huge. And of course, as a Hydra, it does have multiple heads, and yeah, this thing definitely has earned its title of the Soul of the World. Now with this next one I'm going to bring up, there's a lot of Mitch math involved, and I keep going back and forth, but here we go. Celestial Force, I believe, is incredibly massive. The way that I personally picture the mountains in this artwork, I am just basically picturing, like Mount Everest, the biggest mountains in the land. And then Celestial Force is basically kind of like up into the atmosphere of the actual Earth or whatever plane it's on itself. And this thing just is kind of covering the sky. And the flavor text really kind of hits home with this. Wishing upon only one star seems like a failure of imagination. In the artwork, you can kind of see that this is kind of like a constellation kind of connecting. Yeah, this thing, the scale on it is just absolutely huge. Again, all of this is very Mitch math, and yeah, I'm sure that this one's gonna have some debate to it in the comments, and then some people are like, why in the world Celestial Force all the way up here? I don't think it's anywhere near that large. I personally just, the way I see it, it is bigger than Progenitus, although it's probably very close. Next up, though, is one that I'm sure many of you have been waiting for me to bring up. And that, of course, is BFM, otherwise known as Big Furry Monster. Now, obviously with this art, this takes 2 cards to actually show with the left side and the right side, and you can actually only see even just part of its head. The flavor text on this one is really great. It says, "It was big, really, really big. No, bigger than that, even bigger. Keep going. More, no more. Look, we're talking Krakens and Dreadnoughts for jewelry. It was big." So again, with its earrings, on the left side, we've got what I believe is Polar Kraken, and on the right side, we've got Phyrexian Dreadnought. And for context of size, here are those pictures. These things are absolutely massive. I mean, I believe when BFM, and correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong, at the time BFM was made, these might have been the biggest creatures in Magic, and obviously the joke is, hey, this thing is so much larger that it's wearing them as jewelry. So yeah, BFM is on a scale that is just incomprehensible. And again, with this, we just see the top of its head. We don't see anything underneath that. This thing could be wide, this thing could be absolutely massive. We have no idea. And this is kind of where things get hairy, pun intended. Regardless, let's move on to the next one. And with this one, okay, this one takes a bit of imagination, and I still have different feelings on it. And that card would be Bearer of the Heavens, and bear with me really quick. Get it? Anyways, it says, "To hold the heavens from the earth is no curse, but a titanic responsibility." So this Titan is literally holding the heavens up. Now, for context, the actual image of it doing this is where I go back and forth. If it is truly holding the heavens of Theros up, I have no idea how you'd actually picture its size, or okay, what is holding the heavens? Like, how big is the heavens? But if you actually see the picture of this one, though, it kind of looks like it's on top of a mountain or like a lava pit of some sort, and you can see like clouds in the area. So yes, this thing looks massive, but not massive enough to actually hold the heavens up. So yeah, with this one, I kind of just, went off, my normal procedure by basing things on the art just a little bit, just because, well, if it's actually holding the heavens up, it'd be bigger than what it actually seems like in the art, but I don't know. Debate in the comments below and let me know why I'm wrong. But now let's move on to one that I will probably not budge on with Child of Alara, and actually this is the card that started the entire thing. Alec has a deck built around this cosmic space baby, and that's how this entire debate started. So how big exactly is a cosmic space baby? Well, it's kind of hard to tell because, well, the scaling is just kind of tough. With the way that I picture this is that this is basically like an asteroid belt with some of these rock chunks that you can kind of see, and this cosmic space baby is huge. I mean, those asteroids look absolutely tiny in comparison, and yeah, Cosmo Space Baby is on a cosmic scale when it comes to size. That being said, it is not, in my opinion, the largest creature in the Magic Multiverse. And that award actually goes to what is technically not a creature, but then it technically is a creature with Genji of the Realm. So, Genji of the Realm is a legendary enchant land, but by paying 2, you can make it into a legendary 8/12 spirit creature with trample until end of turn. It's still a land. Okay, technically, I am saying that this is a creature, or at least a being in the multiverse that is clearly massive. I mean, please correct me if I am wrong, but I believe that's just Kamigawa underneath it. And Genji of the Realm is like crouching, so you don't even see it just standing up for its, full size. So this thing seems like it's apparently the size of just a Magic the Gathering plane. And yeah, that is just a massive scale that just dwarfs everything else in this episode. At least I believe it does. So yeah, when we started off, we had creatures that were bigger than buildings, but now we've got, you know, a Genji that is bigger than essentially what is a world, so there you go. Again, apologies for all the Mitch math in this episode, but yeah, this is my final decision. I believe that Genji of the Realm is the largest creature in the Magic Multiverse, even though it kind of technically isn't a creature to start, but then it becomes a creature. You know what I mean. Regardless, with all of this, I would love to hear from you, so let me know what your thoughts on my picks are, and if I left out any creatures that I should have brought up. So yeah, just let me know in the comments below, and of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one.